Good afternoon, hello, welcome to the TriathlonDan YouTube channel. Welcome Sam from Total Endurance Nutrition. Good afternoon, Sam.
Afternoon.
Fresh back from Kona.
Fresh tan, yeah.
Yeah,
It's all peeled off now,
yes.
unfortunately. But there you go.
Brilliant. Well, I've already chewed some ears off about Kona. Today, we're going to be talking about the Deca. So for those who have been living under a rock, my friend James did a Deca Ironman this year, and Sam and Total Endurance Nutrition supported James throughout that event through Sam himself and Harvey and Jen, two of Sam's colleagues. That was made up of a nutrition plan, nutrition support on the day, but also nutrition data collection. So now we're a couple of months on, and Sam's had a chance in between training for the Ironman World Championships and competing to go through all that data. And there's a few interesting things in there. And I know I've certainly had a lot of questions myself. Things like, how many calories was James eating? How much was he burning? How much salt did he go through? What were his macros? All those sorts of things. And I've not really been able to answer any of them other than saying he ate a lot of trifle. So Sam is here today to talk us through basically what James ate and drank and how that affected him and the roller coaster of Deca. If you've got any questions about any of this, please do drop them in the comment section down below. Sam, I'm sure, will be keeping an eye out in there. So if there's any questions that if there's any questions that I can't answer, obviously I can't answer any of them. If there's any questions that you got, drop them down there, and I'm sure Sam will be happy to answer. Maybe this is one for the nerds amongst us, but hopefully some of you will find this interesting. And I know I certainly will, because Sam, we haven't actually had this conversation yet, have we? So we're essentially just documenting this. And I would have loved to get James around here to hear this as well, but he's on holiday, so we'll have to crack on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it all sounds good. So, I don't know where you want to start, Dan. I mean, we've got a lot of data, I would say. I mean, I should probably just say up front, I was there for a couple of days, and then Harvey and Jen did the bulk of this work. So, hats off to them for keeping the data collection going, let's say, and also to support James. I know he really valued that, and they're doing all sorts together now. So friends for life.
I know. I've been bumped out of the inner circle. So for those that don't know, give me in a nutshell, what is Total Endurance Nutrition and who are you?
Yeah, so Total Endurance Nutrition, we essentially provide nutrition consultancy, but mainly probably nutrition plans for people, predominantly in triathlon, but also other endurance sports, or ultra endurance sports in particular. And that can range from anywhere like how can we improve diet on a daily basis to support training, maximize recovery, that sort of thing, especially for triathletes who are doing a lot of training even at the age group level, alongside a family and a job. It's pretty tricky to balance it all. So that's mainly where we sit. That includes also ensuring that people build into that plan a race plan. So if we're preparing for an event, we make sure that we're going through the process of gut training, making sure everyone knows by the time they come to their A race what their specific plan is, and that we've tried and tested that in some B races or training simulations or whatever it is. So that's where we sit really.
Excellent. I think you're pretty much the experts within the ultra endurance field. I've not seen anybody else so heavily involved in a Deca. So we did some testing with James in the lab, kindly arranged by Sam earlier this year, some lactate testing and other things, and then obviously you were there throughout. So shall we dive into it then through that? So some of the questions people asked about calories in, calories out, and all these other things that go along with it. As a nutritionist, what observations did you make throughout the event?
Yeah, so the key observation is he ate a lot of food. I mean, essentially, what we wanted to do is collect energy expenditure, or get an idea of what his energy expenditure is at least. And obviously you had the link with Garmin, so that was pretty valuable to collect that sort of information. So we got calories from the swim, bike and run. We can also estimate from height, weight and age his sort of daily calorie requirements, just at a baseline level as well. So put all that together, and you start to understand what the energy requirements are for this type of event, especially on each day. I'm
assuming this differs because in a one-day event you'll do so many carbs an hour and stuff, but we're not thinking about the day, or we're thinking about the next day and the day after and the day after.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's not just a one-day plan here. We've got to make sure that calorie intake on one day is not going to influence the next, or it is going to influence it in a positive way, should I say. So we need to stay on top of it each day. There's no sort of respite in that respect. So you can't let it drop too much. But one of the, I suppose one of the key things to say, first of all, is in terms of energy expenditure, throughout the day, and this includes like his basal sort of requirements, it's about 8,500 calories he was expending each day. So you made the face there, but actually, when we if we did a single Ironman, we'd probably expect somewhere in the region of 9,000 to 10,000 calories to be burnt during that. So
what you're saying is he wasn't trying very hard.
So he wasn't trying very hard, but to account for that, it was obviously a much lower intensity to do that, because he's having to back that up day after day.
He was so controlled on the bike, wasn't he? Really,
and that's it. Yeah, exactly. So taking out of account his basal requirements, then during the race, if we like, each day, it was about 6,500 calories. So when I compare that to an Ironman, it's obviously much less than a one-day event. So how did then he, I suppose, what's the opposite of that in terms of intake? Well, we're looking at about just over 7,000 calories consumed each day. So it's 7,200 ballpark on average each day. Most of that was during the race, as we'd expect. About 80% of the calories were during the race, because he's racing essentially all day.
He's racing or he's asleep.
Yeah, so that was about 5,500 calories during the race on average. But the thing that we were interested in, and the primary thing, is that difference between the energy expenditure and the energy intake. And what we want to do is ensure that there's not too much of a disparity in that, especially when we're having to back it up from day to day to day. If you get behind on one day, maybe we'll get away with that, and we'll discuss that in a little minute, actually. But if you're quite a lot behind day after day after day, then you start to be in trouble, particularly towards the end of the event. And maybe that's what happens with some of your competitors, for example. We don't know. His deficit each day was just over 1,000 calories, so it was about 1,200 calories in the red, if we like, on average over the event. So that's not too bad, essentially, only being about 1,000 calories behind. So that's a positive thing. Again, there's specific examples when it was way more than that, and much less than that as well. But on average, we were pretty happy with that sort of 1,000, 1,200 calorie deficit each day through the event for James, and he seemed to, obviously, it worked out pretty well.
1,000 calories in relation to body weight, like is that it's not a rate of, is it 500 calories a day for a week's a pound? So does that make it about?
Yeah, very roughly. Yeah. So in terms of his weight loss, he only actually lost about 3 kilos through the event. There's been instances of people losing 5 to 10 kilos during these type of events as well. You get quite a range, as you can imagine. So we were pretty on track in that respect, and a small deficit each day is probably not, it's not unusual, and it's quite hard, as we found, to make sure that James was actually getting enough calories each day. You do well to entirely match your requirements or the expenditure, I would say.
Yeah. So obviously during the day we didn't have an exact number as to how many calories he had. However, we do know that he spent every waking moment eating as much as he could. So I think we'd have struggled to get many more calories down him than we did. But however, if his performance was dropping off, or if we knew that he was going to be more than that in deficit, he'd have to, wouldn't he, surely?
Yeah, and I suppose there was one really clear example of that. So from us as nutritionists, what we were aiming to do is, ultimately, we're trying to match intake to expenditure. Now, I've already said that that's not realistic, but we need to get as close as we can. But it's interesting when we looked at the data to see how his energy intake matched his performance day to day as well. And there was kind of one specific day, and you might have put it on Instagram, or it might have been on one of the videos, where you said it's Simpo time today.
Yeah,
I think that was day 7. So it was sort of the day when he sort of went, right, it's on.
I think he tried on 7 and then he did it on 8.
So, and that's exactly what we saw. So that phrase was uttered on day 7, and we thought, right, okay, it's on. And I think, if I recall, there was a bit of a concerted effort, particularly on the bike that day, to like head down, right, let's crack on.
Yeah,
Now,
he did tell me he attacked on the bike. Now I've analysed his power file. I don't know as if it was an attack, but it was definitely attacking in relation to what he was doing the rest of the day.
yeah, so I mean that's really interesting that he took that approach, and I think the key thing there is he's going to have reduced the time available to or the, I don't know what the word is, the concentration, I suppose, or the focus on fueling appropriately. So by the end of that day, his deficit was about 3,500 calories.
Wow.
And despite that being the day when he went, right, it's on, that was actually one of his poorer days, let's say, in terms of his performance. Like, he had some, there were some slower days than that, of course, particularly towards the end, the last couple of days, but that's fine. But it was quite interesting, and I think Harvey and Jen, when I spoke to them about that, they were sort of aware of that. So there was a bit more of a concerted effort on day 8, the next day, to make sure that we weren't going that much into the red, and hopefully actually matching intake to expenditure better that day. Yeah. So on day 8, he was only actually, by the end of the day, in about 250 cal deficit.
Yeah,
so
day 8 was really panic stations. That was when Harvey and Jen weren't there, and that was when James was like, I'm on it. But I think because he knew it was time, he was also making an effort to eat and drink loads of things. So he was actually asking us. So, okay, so getting up to that point, we've talked about calories in, calories out. What about, how many carbs an hour is he having? How much of that is protein, all that sort of thing? How much salt's he taking on board? We know he absolutely annihilated the precision hydration stock.
Yeah, could have done with that sponsorship, couldn't you?
Yeah, I know. We had to get a midweek delivery in.
Yeah, so in terms of carbs, so we can look at this in a number of different ways. Like, on a daily basis, we can think, right, what percentage of calories are coming from carbs, fats, and proteins, and that was about 63%-ish from carbs on average, 23% from sort of fat, and then 13% from protein, very roughly speaking. That doesn't mean too much, especially in the context of the race. So I think one of the ways that we can contextualize that a bit for everyone else is looking at the amount of carbs per kilo of body weight. So particularly when we're thinking about carb loading, or just a normal day for an average athlete, then we can think about what their carb requirements might be on those types of days. So just a standard day with a couple of training sessions, we might be somewhere between 4 and 6 grams of carbs per kilo body weight. In terms of carb loading, if we're going to do a 70.3 or an Ironman a day or a couple of days before, then we might eat somewhere between 10 and 12 grams per kilo body weight, which is quite a lot, as you're aware, from Wales. James was actually eating about 16 to 18 grams per kilo of carbs through the event. So this is very, very carb heavy, and he's having to consume a lot of carbs to get through this event. Wow. As we would expect, essentially. Yeah,
I'm sure he won't mind me saying he's about 70 kilos, isn't he? 69, 72.
Yeah, just up to about the end. So yeah, perfect. We can look at that in terms of how does that match to like the recommendation. So if you think about, again, a typical sort of 70.3 or Ironman, we might think for the bike and maybe the run with sort of in the ballpark of 70 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. He's a lot lower than that. Well, a little bit lower than that, 64 grams of carbs per hour through the event as well. So you can start to see that there's going to be a little bit more of a contribution from fat to get to the calorie requirements, let's say. So sort of in the region about 10, 11 grams fat per hour. Not that we're really thinking about that as nutritionists. It's mainly carbs but through food, and the fat kind of take care of itself in a little way. But the other thing that's worth noting as well is his protein intake. Obviously, in a one-day event, protein becomes, is not a priority at all. But when we're doing these multiple day sort of events, he's got to back up day to day to day, and having sufficient protein in the diet is going to be critical for how he recovers. And so that you'll have seen on the videos that we were, as soon as he was finishing, we were chucking a protein shake down him, or recovery shake, should I say, and then he was having his casein before bed to make sure he's got a bit of overnight protein to recover. So there was a bit of a focus on that as well. And also a little bit of a focus through the day, through the, whilst he was racing as well, because you can't just expect to take all your protein in at the end of the day. So we were actually looking somewhere between 5 and 10 grams of protein per hour, which is kind of alongside the sort of recommended intake for these types of events. And we actually hit that. So that was a real positive. And again, I think contributed to how he recovered from day to day.
Yeah,
he wasn't fresh by the end, but
he started off having a protein shake with breakfast, but then after day 3, after his upset stomach day, he started having it after the swim, along with his other supplements. So thank you to Nuzest for supporting with this effort. Nuzest provided his morning protein, then he had some SIS casein protein in the evening, which wasn't sponsored, but for a different reason, because casein digests slower. All right.
Yeah, so it was Nutrition X. Sorry, I think the casein.
Right.
But yeah, that's the idea. Is it's slow digesting compared to a whey protein, and the slow protein is great for like overnight. You just slow release from the gut into the blood, and it supports recovery.
I think they're the sort of things where support crew comes in, because I don't know, big ourselves up, but when you finish an event like that, if somebody's made you a shake and thrusting it in your hand, you're going to get it down on you. Whereas if it's a decision between picking up a banana and eating it or making a shake, you're always going to go for the pre-made thing. Newsest actually asked me during the week if I could get some content of James making a protein shake. I was like, he hasn't made one all week. We're doing it all for him. He's not got a clip. He thinks to come in that beaker with water already in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but no, I think I really reiterate that that's a key part for these multi-day events. You've got to think about beyond carbs and calories, and think about how you're going to support that from protein and also fat as well.
Because it doesn't make any sense for a single day event, does it? Like if you say to us, get out of the swim and then have a protein shake, you'd say, what are you on about?
So yeah, that's critical. I think the other thing that we obviously looked at is his fluid intake per day, and we were very mindful of that right at the start of the event, because we had those, that first day when it was cut short anyway because of the heat, but then even the next day was pretty warm, and probably day 3 and day 4 were fairly warm as well, I think. So this is skewed a little bit, but on average it was about 9 liters of fluid per day. Most of that again was during the race, but again, just to contextualize that, it was about 500 mils per hour during the event, which kind of is on the just about acceptable sort of limit. Let's say it's at the lower end, I would say, for what you might want to do, but it's sort of in the range that's acceptable for compared to like a 1-day event where it might be you might say a bottle an hour is a very broad goal for people.
Yeah, and it would have been amazing to get the exact data that James was drinking every day, but I'd eat my hat if anybody could track that accurately. When it's really hot and he's chucking half a bottle on top of him and having a few sips and giving it you back, you're like, how many milliliters was that, James? Or he's chucking a bottle at you that's got like a third left in it and you're giving him a fresh one. Exactly. We could have started weighing it and stuff, but it's just too time pressured. So I think that's probably fairly accurate. From memory, on the bike, he was spending between 30 and 35 minutes on a lap, and it normally be every other lap would be swapping his bottle.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we were happy with that, and he seemed to manage that okay as well. So that's the important thing. I think just related to that, then obviously we need to think about sodium intake, and it was about 11 grams of sodium per day that he was taking on. Again, skewed a little bit by the heat in the early part of the race as well, but that's something to consider again in terms of just maintaining muscle function, obviously trying to avoid cramps and staying on top of like hydration. Is
11 grams a lot or not?
That's a fair bit. I suppose as a comparison, at Kona, I did about 10 grams, but that was for you're in somewhere that's much hotter and more humid,
and you're out there a lot less time than he was.
Yeah, and I'm not a particularly salty, sweater. I'm a very average sort of salty sweater, let's say. So that trying to contextualize that a little bit there. So one of the things that I think, given more time, that he could make more of is the caffeine. So James was having a coffee every morning, if I recall.
It started off as a cup of coffee, and then by the end of the week, it was like a mouthful.
Yeah.
I made it wrong one day, and all that.
So I think that's something where we, if we were going to do this again, then it's something that could take a bit of focus and time. Well, yeah, because that's really probably about only plus a Coke during the day. He was probably having about 100 to 150 milligrams per day, which is about 2 milligrams per kilo body weight. And if you listen to someone like Andy Blow talk, people tolerate, that's on the very low end of things, really.
I guess he was on about that. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and there is, so if we were looking at things we could improve, that's certainly one area we could consider. But I think having a caffeine plan takes a lot of practice. When we were talking at the start about what we do from Total Endurance Nutrition, we know that the carb plan comes in much faster than the caffeine plan, let's say. Yeah, okay, that's the kind of like sprinkle dust, let's say, that we, the cherry on the top for the nutrition plan, but it could have, been useful, I think, as well to some time.
I know that I'm trying not to talk for James, but I know through training with him quite a lot that he steers away from all that. Like, he steers away from energy products, he steers away from caffeine, other than having a coffee, because I think he sees it as a bit of, oh, I'm in trouble, I need caffeine, or, oh, I'm racing, I need caffeine. Because he's not thinking either of those things, he didn't necessarily want it. Like, for example, the only pain relief he had was on the last day. I saw nearly every other competitor popping pills like they were Smarties. So I think some of that is just his ingrained, oh, I don't need to do that, but actually his performance could have been better if he had. But the ultra endurance world there's some wicked characters there as we met them, most of them, and I bet a lot of them aren't using these things because it's a relatively modern science, isn't it? Like caffeine management and so on. They're probably just sticking to what they know, what they've tested, and what works. But being open to these new methods, could be advantageous. And that's where somebody you would come in and educate somebody, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I say, it takes a lot more refinement, I would say, than getting the carb intake right for these types of events, or even just a one-day event. The caffeine sort of protocol takes a little bit more refinement, and it's very individual as well. You can't just pick up, one that works for one individual, because it probably won't work for you either.
Yeah. Was there anything that stuck out numbers wise about on day 3 he had a tummy upset, and we put it down to the pizza he had the night before? Do you think that was the case, or was there something else going off?
I mean, from our, looking at what he ate, it was nothing unusual. So beyond the pizza, the takeout pizza. So I think that probably was where it came from. But I was happy with how Jen and Harvey managed that as well. And I should say well done to them for that, because yeah, okay, with James, he wasn't trying to force calories down him, and he, gave it time to settle, let's say. The key thing was they actually, they did a pretty good job of making up the calories later in the day. So it was almost like a back-ended day in terms of calorie intake, which is quite different to every other day. But it was important, particularly at that stage, day 3, you're getting really stuck into it by that point. Yeah. So any issues with calorie intake that day and then could have, led on to the next day, and that would have really curtailed the effort.
Yeah, I think Matt Bagshaw dealt with that situation very well as well with the wetsuit. That is definitely a day where Jen and Harvey got to work and did things that they didn't perhaps vocalize, so we didn't really notice, but they were doing that without thinking about it. James was, as you say, just letting his stomach settle. And I remember them doing things like putting a couple of biscuits in a sandwich because it's just a bit stodgy, it's just a bit plain carbs, and just to get something inside of him, but a bit more calories because he knew he was behind. And then yes, later on in the day, when he said, "Oh, I feel like I've turned a corner now," they were like, "Right, get this down you." So I think that's where having an actual like educated and experienced team are going to make the difference. Because if that was just me with James, I don't know as if I'd have been pushing in calories down him later in the day. He might be thinking, "Oh, he's had a bit of an off day today. Let's just do as he wants, see how he gets on." So,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, for us, it was a great opportunity, really, and probably just extend the thanks to James as well for being a willing participant in this. It's certainly thrown us thrown up some interesting information, and in terms of education, there's not really that much data out in the world, for people who are trying to do these events to understand what they need to do, really, from a nutrition perspective. How much of a run up do they need to these types of things, and also in the event, where does the focus need to be? And I'll probably go back to the start and say the key thing for us was trying to match the intake to expenditure and how much leeway you have with that. And I think the key thing that helps James is that we were monitoring that throughout. And I would say anyone who wants to do these types of events, it needs to really be monitored by an external person. It doesn't have to be a nutritionist. Like, I suppose that's the dream. And of course, like, happy to help people, but someone needs to kind of take care of that for the athlete, I would say, where possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the results can speak any more for themselves, can they? So if somebody's watching this who is either thinking about doing an ultra endurance event, an ultra endurance probably starts anything Ironman or above as classed as ultra. Are you going to put this information anywhere from your findings for James? And if they want to get some personalized advice or personalized nutrition plan, or even support at an event, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so most active on Instagram. So it's total_endurance_nutrition. But what I'm going to do is I'm in the process of writing up this data as a blog, or a couple of blogs actually, that will go on our website. So it's just totalendurancenutrition.com to find those and read those. And if you want some support or have any questions, you can reach out via the form or via Instagram as well. And it's happy to help.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got a couple of questions, but before I go on to questions, have you got anything else you wanted to share from James's data?
No, I mean, I suppose beyond the data that we've talked about, really, there's other things that are going to come from it that I suppose as scientists we're interested in. Little things like how much of the calories were coming from like solid food or from drinks and things like that. So I might put some of that insight also onto the blog posts around this. Probably the first one will be up at the start of next week is the plan, and then we'll try and drip feed those as I get a little bit more through the data and get the opportunity to write them up as well. Because ultimately we just want this to be a bit of resource for people as well. As I said, when I've looked, I can't really find much information about these, how you fuel these types of events for the public and people who want to do these type of events to use as a resource. So that's hopefully what this will act as in the first instance.
Okay, I'll leave the links in the description down below. There will be I'll hold this video until those things are live, so it'll be live. Looking back at the Deca, is there anything that you think I know you've touched on a couple of things, but anything else you think we could have done differently? Not criticizing what was done because we didn't know what we don't know, but if you were to do one again for James, what would you do differently?
I think probably one of the things I would like to do is start working with James a little bit earlier and actually implementing some of these strategies, I suppose, into his training a little bit earlier. If I put that into context a little bit more, for people who want to do an Ironman or a 70.3, we normally say you need sort of 8 to 12 weeks of working with us just to firstly, get the nutrition, your daily nutrition right, because that plays a big part in what you're doing on race day actually, and supports the training in that last build into these types of events anyway. But the key thing being that you want to really refine what your race strategy is, and that doesn't just include like carb loading, for example, in the days leading up, but it includes what you're doing the morning of the race, what you're doing throughout the race, where are you going to carry your nutrition and things. So bringing that back to James, I would like to have kind of done a little bit of that with him in the lead up to it, just to see if we could push the calorie intake a little bit higher. Even we were pretty happy with where it was at, but if you're looking for perfection all the time, we'd be bang on if we could match it a little bit. And I think that'd be something to practice, and also we'd get a really good understanding of what foods he would like as well. We were doing a bit of guesswork on the go there, so we'd have a good idea leading into the event if we'd worked a little bit together in the lead up to it. But pretty happy with how it went anyway.
Okay. My second question is about supplements. We've already mentioned protein, and I know you can class some food as a supplement and so on. James had a number of supplements, some before the effort and some during it. Are there any particular ones that you think were really beneficial to him? Are there any that you think were neither here nor there, made no difference? I know he had those Currans, he had Uperform gels, he had some sort of oil tablets, and I probably missed a couple.
Yeah, so I think we had omega-3 tablets. So they're important. Well, sorry, let's start that again. I think supplements in themselves, it's important to remember that getting your nutrition right on a daily basis and throughout this event in terms of James's calorie intake, that was the critical aspect for us. The supplements are the kind of icing on the cake, let's say. And they can just make that, it's the 1-2% really that we're talking about with supplements, because as the name suggests, you're supplementing your diet, so you should all be in a good place anyway. I think, okay, at the most basic level, the supplements in terms of the protein, they were key because we needed to get the protein in an efficient way, and drinks allow that, and obviously he had some food as well to support his protein intake. But in terms of the supplements we provided, so the omega-3s, so there's some research or some good evidence really from research that shows that they can support muscle function and recovery. He was also taking vitamin D, which is important from an immune perspective. I think he was also taking a multivitamin as well, which is just making sure when, you think normally we'd be trying to say, right, get plenty of fruit and veg in your diet and you can probably get away without a multivit, but that wasn't the case during an event where we're just trying to get calories into him, and fairly simple calories at most of the time. So he's probably missing out on some of that, some of the vitamins and minerals that you would get in food. So we needed to make sure that we supplemented it from that perspective. The Currans was also good. We've done ourselves, and there's other people in the UK who've done a lot of research on currants. Currants is essentially a black currant extract, but black currants have high levels of polyphenols in, and there's good evidence now that can support recovery as well. So that was one of the reasons to include that. And then also the collagen gels. So we think about protein to support muscle growth and recovery, but we also need to think about the other constituents of muscles is the ligaments and tendons, and that's where collagen comes in. So supplementing with collagen to make sure that they're still functioning well and recovering well from each day was critical there as well. So yeah, it seems like a bit of a cocktail, but in the context of what he was doing, I think everything there had a role, and that's what I would say. You don't just take something for the sake of it. There needs to be a reason to take it.
Yeah, and he tends to just deal with it after day 3. After the swim, you just get them down, and that was it. You won't have to think about it the rest of the day. Okay, interesting. All right, as I say, then, if you've got any questions, let us know down below. If you want to discuss your own nutrition, Sam, as he says, just deals with people who do sprint triathlon through to ultra endurance events, and you don't have to be a triathlete, swim, bike, run, anything. I take it you're open to any crazy challenges now on this one.
Well, any crazy challenges. And what I would say is, most of the people that we work with are the sort of busy age groupers, and that's where we, sit really. It's not that we're trying to work with professionals only. And I don't believe that nutrition support is only for professionals. I think probably they've got the time to actually get it right. It's the people who don't have the time who need the support. We invest a lot of money in triathlon and these ultra endurance events, but the nutrition can really, solidify the training and everything else. So yeah, really critical in that respect.
Wicked. I try not to sell things on this channel, but if I was ever to try and sell something, it's something that I've seen hands-on actually works. So yeah, check him out. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers,
I'm going to wave now, like we're having another conversation straight after this. Bye.
Bye.